Hello, dear perceptive souls. This is Bevin Niemann. I am a life purpose coach and an intuitive business mentor for empaths, mystics, and light workers. And what really wanted to flow through today is something that may be sort of a contentious topic, and that is how men and women express emotions, right? And when I say that, I'm recognizing that there can be like a huge tendency for stereotyping because people are very diverse. We all grew up in a different way. We all have a different understanding of ourselves as an emotional being. As humans, we are emotional beings. There's so much about our daily life that's driven by our emotional needs and our emotional expression. We're passionate, sometimes we're angry, sometimes we're sad or depressed, sometimes we're joyous, and we have all of these range of emotions. But this has come up a couple of times in conversations with colleagues and with clients, and I just wanted to begin to explore this energy. I've talked a lot about the masculine and the feminine energies, the masculine being the more dynamic, outpouring force, our doing in the world, and the feminine being the more inwardly focused beingness in the world. And I want to talk from a place of, my nose is really itchy. This is like why it's an important thing to bring forward. I want to talk about some of the anger that's felt by the feminine dynamic when the feminine feels like the masculine is not coming from a place of empathy, of care. Seems to be self-focused, self-centered, even, if you will. And, I've listened and bear witness to multiple times recently where this particular concept has come up. And different words are thrown around, like narcissist and emotionally shut down. And I've even struggled a bit with this in some of my relationships. And what I've come to is that none of us are really comfortable with our emotions. There are, according to the Myers-Briggs personality assessment, there are people who are further on the scale into being in the thinking mind, right? Being more analytical, more logical, could be men or women. And there are people who are more on the feeling side, more expressive, more coming from the heart space. That's more of the heart intelligence. And we seem to have more of a dominant trait and a less dominant trait, each person, regardless of whether their gender is male, female, non-binary, or anything in between on the spectrum. And so our comfort level with our emotions has a lot to do with how we grew up, how we watched our parents or our caregivers deal with emotions, and whether we were allowed to really express ourselves and it was safe to actually feel. Is it safe to express that externally? And from what I understand with the Myers-Briggs personality assessment, then those people, each person has like a, what do I want to call it? An aspect where their feelings are either internalized and they kind of hold that within and they process that within, or they have feelings that are external, right? And you need to bounce something off of someone else in order to understand what's happening inside of you. And so we have all these different dynamics, right? And what I'll say is that traditionally speaking, in our world, and this doesn't obviously cover every human being, but traditionally speaking, men were brought up and socialized from one generation to the other to be strong, to be the protector, to be the provider, to be the one who needed to be a little more stoic, more analytical. And women were brought up and socialized and put into you know, a specific role for the majority of humankind, human history, to be more of a nurturer, more empathetic, more in that connection space with others in their community and their family system. And we've played out these roles for a really long time, this duality, right? This duality. And we actually see that that's playing out very, very deeply in our world right now. Because we're in a time where those who are in power and in that power structure, which are primarily men, not always, and not in every country. And, you know, we have more women leaders of countries and of states and, you know, and governorships and all of those things, whatever those positions are called, wherever you're from, than we ever have before, you know. And now really what women of my generation and women that are younger than me as well, I'm Gen X and there's Gen Y and Gen Z, they're asking the men in their lives to be in that emotional intelligence, to tap into that. We're asking for that in the workplace, for empathy, for compassion, to be treated, you know, not like a robot, but like a human being, right? We're asking for that in our interpersonal relationships. We're asking for that within our family system. We're asking for those who have primarily been in the masculine energy, the doing, pursuing, competitive, analytical, logical, linear processes, to now navigate a world culture which is extremely diverse, very complex, more intuitive, and a lot of what we're facing right now, with healthcare, with economic systems, with racism, with you know all these different issues that we have, environmental. It really is the realm of those with a deeper dive into the feminine mindset, who are stepping forward and saying these things aren't acceptable. And what we want is more equality, and what we want is more care, and what we want is less focus on things like profit and productivity, and because it's coming at the expense of people on our planet. And what we're also seeing is a lot of pushback for that, right? Because this has been the way it's been for so long. And, you know, we can be really frustrated about it. And I've spoken recently with multiple women who are very frustrated about this, and very frustrated with the people in their lives, or in their workplaces, or just in culture and in leadership in general. And the conversations that we've been having, and the conversation I've been having with myself, because I've been in that place of frustration as well, is that there is no roadmap for the masculine right now. We're asking people to go from something that they've done their entire life. Excuse me. Wow. It's a lot of third chakra stuff going on there. We're asking people who have been accustomed to living a certain way, interacting with the world in a certain way, intersecting with others in a certain way, to just flip and move into this more feminine focused methodology. And what I'll say about that is that has to be difficult for them. Now, that doesn't mean I'm giving anyone a pass, or I'm saying that people shouldn't be empathetic, or that, you know, we should deal with narcissism, or we should deal with any of these things that we see that are unacceptable in our world, because we shouldn't. What I'm saying is, in order to move forward, there has to be a place, there has to be a softening in the masculine heart and in the feminine heart in order for us to move forward. Because while we sit and point fingers at each other, we're not really getting anywhere, right? We're not getting anywhere. And everyone is just defending their way of thinking, their way of being, whether you're talking about people who have held particular belief systems around who is equal and who is not, based on their skin color, or their ethnicity, or their religion, or their socioeconomic class. We have lots of layers, but it's really the same core fundamental argument underneath, which is, are we going to treat all human beings as infinitely valuable and equal, or are we not? Are we going to continue to have power over other people, or are we going to inspire everyone to have power from within? And this is really the decision point that we have. And there are those who are really afraid that if they give that power up, then they will lose worth, they'll lose value, they'll lose money, they'll lose, someone's going to take advantage of them. Someone might be retaliating based on the things that they've done that now they're pissed off about. All these things, there's lots of layers to why people are holding on so tightly, and not just men, but also women, holding on so tightly to an old philosophy of how to treat each other and how to show up in this world. And so we're invited to have compassion for each other as we navigate this immense shift and transformation, as we cross a threshold that we've never been before. Every single moment of every day is a place that we have not been before as humankind. And when we realize this, when we recognize we're all sort of fumbling around in the dark here, we're all sort of trying to figure out how to do this, how to live with each other, how to find peace on earth, how to ensure that everyone has the resources that they need. And we're not sure how to do all of that. And it's okay that we don't know, right? It's okay that we don't know. But it makes those who believe in that sort of old masculine, very masculine style, traditional conservative style of leadership really uncomfortable, because the other paradigm feels like giving something up. It's like, if I don't have more, then I have to have less so that you can get more. And this is this entire idea, whether you're talking about money or power or a voice or whatever, or presence or whatever you're talking about. It's like, do I have to give something up? I'm not giving something up. I'm going to hold my ground, and so we see that this is what's leading to every single social issue that we're facing right now. And I felt really strongly that we just need to sit in compassion for each other as we try to navigate this. It doesn't mean we won't see something we don't like, or we won't maybe have a disagreement with someone else about what that looks like or what the world should be. We have lots of different ideas. Everyone has a different plan for where the future should go. And yet somehow together we need to create this collective plan, right? We need to create this collective plan. So I thought I would pull a few cards and just see, what comes out for this. And I'm working to heal this within myself. Anytime where I have been cruel or disrespectful to the masculine external to me, the masculine inside of me, and any place where I've been cruel or hurtful to the feminine inside of me or the feminine outside of me, just offering some healing around this, because there's so much anger and so much strife, and part of why I came here, as I've come to understand myself, I'm a rainbow adult and I was a rainbow child, and I'm just beginning to understand what that means to hold the frequency of unity, right? It doesn't mean that everything's going to be perfect, because it's not. We're having a human experience, right? And we're going to make mistakes, and we're going to say things we regret, and we're going to make assumptions, and we're going to make judgments, and we're going to do things that, sometimes human beings do things that are horrific to each other. And these are things that are part of this human experience, unfortunately. But what I'm offering here today is some healing around that. And where that healing comes in is that we all recognize that we don't quite know how to do this. We don't know. We don't know how to have these conversations. We don't really know how to move forward. How do we find common ground? How do we find the middle path, as Buddhists say, the middle way? How do we do that? So let's see what the mystical shaman oracle has to say about that. And as I split the deck, these two cards came out, the hummingbird and the beauty way, right? Both of those are even numbers, cards of balance. This is the high frequency, right? And this is seeing the good in everything and in everyone, which can often be difficult, right? When we don't agree, right? It can be challenging. So the first card that came out was the Ghost Dance, right? This is a master number. And the Ghost Dance is really about our ancestors. You know, you can see that there's layers and layers. There's just this sort of shadowy figure coming out. And these are really the choices that all of our ancestors have made. Each generation passing on to the next generation a particular set of ideas, beliefs, mindsets, and then carrying that forward and carrying that forward. And every once in a while in a generation that there was a child that said, you know, I don't really want to carry that anymore. I want to do something differently, and kind of started off a new timeline, right? Just a new timeline. And this is about really offering forgiveness for all of the things that our ancestors did, the choices that they made based on the consciousness that they had at the time, the lack of understanding that sometimes we still express into this time period right here, right? So we look back in history and we say, oh, that was horrific. You know, we don't ever want to repeat that. And then, you know, 100 years from now, our descendants maybe say the same thing. They're like, wow, they were barbaric. Like, can you imagine the kinds of things that they thought and how they did the world, you know? And we're just, again, trying to be kind and have compassion and find a place of forgiveness. It doesn't mean we ever forget anything that's happened. As a matter of fact, we need to remember our mistakes. But going back into your ancestral line, and I've done a lot of this work to just offer healing for any time when there was wounding for any reason. And any time that got passed down through the DNA, and then I've been carrying that my whole life, my family members have been carrying that, and how it's time to put that down. It's time to say, you know, that time is done. You know, so here we have the blade, and we have the blade in reverse. And you see, like, it's really pretty interesting. There's like the cycles, right, of the moon, and this is the fullness. So the fullness of the moon, this is when the blade would be in its strongest. And the blade, of course, is a weapon. It could be used to slice and dice and cut and maim and injure. And I don't think there's one of us that probably hasn't used it in that way. You know, we all have this inner blade, right? But when it's in reverse, it is calling out for us to soften our hearts, to open our minds to lots of possibilities. This is the unity, right? The unity consciousness, the wholeness. And we're going through these different phases to try to get there, right? And so the blade now is coming down into the earth. It is becoming a balance point as opposed to a weapon. We've had so many years, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of years perhaps, of fighting and killing and subjugating and doing all these things, right? And so this is the sixth energy. You know, we're being asked to come into a world of peace and harmony. This is our invitation, right? This is our invitation. And the next thing that comes out is the corn. Having spent a good portion of my childhood in Indiana, in the United States, I definitely understand what the corn is all about, right? And so here it is. We have the 10, which is the completion of a cycle. So you plant the corn in the spring, and you sow the little seeds, and you water, and you fertilize, and the sun comes up. And then they say, you know, it needs to be knee high by the 4th of July, which means if you walk the cornfield, it would brush your knee. And the tassels need to be, you know, starting. This is where the pollen is. So there's pollinators that come into the cornfield. And then as the pollinators, you know, create that cycle, we actually start to bring the corn, which is new seed, right? So it comes full cycle, And this is a completion of a cycle, right? So we've had our fill. If you ever eat like a corn on the cob or a couple of corns on the cob, you will be so full, your belly will just be like, okay, it's time to wear some stretchy pants, you know? And this is what it is. It's like we've had our fill of the material, you know, needing to buy so many products, needing to have this huge lifestyle, needing to, you know, do that because some people are able to grow corn, you know, and some people aren't. I mean, you think about people that would live in more of a desert lifestyle would not be able to grow this kind of food. And so they're relying upon the people who do live in this, you know, kind of environment that could do that. And corn is very sweet, so it's a high sugar content. It's a high carbohydrate content. It provides energy, literally. And you see here the sun energy, just like we saw in the blade, right? That unity energy. And this is the crows, you know, so they're flying off. They're like, okay, it's time to migrate, time to go somewhere else. You know, we're time to find a different way of abundance. Like this is abundance, right? This is massive abundance. We have so many resources on this planet. We grow enough food that we can feed every human being. We have enough water that every person could have clean water. It is how do we distribute it? How do we move these resources from one to the other? And how do we decide that, you know, just by virtue of being here as a human being, that you deserve to make sure that you have your basic needs met? And this is really all about that piece. So then I'm going to go to the Sacred Rebels, one of my favorite decks, and we'll see what we have here. So thank you, Holy Ones. What is it that we need to do to heal as we move through this new cycle, particularly between the masculine and the feminine energies? How can they work together rather than be in opposition? How can they gain understanding and appreciation for each other? How can those who do not necessarily identify as either male or female be respected and honored? Let's see what we have here. Let's see what messages come through. How can we begin to heal? Thank you, Holy Ones. Okay. Any more messages, please, for our healing? One more message, please. Ooh, yeah, a real jumper then. Okay, this card keeps coming out. And it keeps coming out for me and a lot of other people. And so this is restore and replenish, right? The 3 and the 8 would be 11, which is the master number. And this really is so much about what we need to do inside of ourselves. You know, we've been so busy, so productive, so competitive, so, you know, focused, so much hustle. You know, and this has been the mentality we've had. And then when all of this happened, when we had the shutdown, and then we had the riots and the protesting and all those things, what is the message for us? It's time to rest, right? It's time to rest. It's time to lay back and just relax. It's time to get quiet. It's time to allow our nervous system to stand down. We've had so much anger, and justifiable anger in many cases. But so much anger, so much yelling, so much shouting, so much fighting that we just can't hardly take it anymore. I talk with everyone, and particularly sensitive people, and they're just like, I'm so exhausted. I just don't know how I can do this, like one more day. And this is the answer for this right now. So when you need to take a nap, take a nap. And when you need to disconnect from social media, disconnect. And think about it. Think twice before you engage in debates and those kinds of things online or within your family system. Just allow yourself to rest and renew, right? And I love this image because it really is about putting the person, putting people and our planet first. I don't know if you can see, but on the outside here, all these little, they kind of look like coins, right? So here's all this material wealth. And yet what we've done is we've put people and our planet at the center. And this is the shift that we're making. And it's very uncomfortable for some. And it's long overdue for others. There's been some out there, you know, have been fighting for this since the 1960s or before. And so it's like, it's time now to restore the balance, to restore and replenish. And the next card that came out is relax the hold of darkness and be at cause, right? So then once we're restored and we've replenished, we sit up and we begin to look and say, what's next for our future? Begin to create this new vibration. It's almost like a portal, right? A portal into another land. And this is an 8 energy, so it's very balanced. It's the infinite flow of giving and receiving, right? It's that we don't ever take more than what we can give back or what the earth can support. So we've been taking and taking and taking. We've been taking from people. We've been building products and building services and things on the backs of people who can barely afford their basic needs in the world. And we've been, you know, basically pumping oil and other thing and taking other resources out of the earth. And, you know, we poured plastic into the ocean, all these things that you already know about. And this is about creating that balance point, that we only take what we need, right? Many indigenous cultures understood this directly because they were so intimately involved with the land. And as we start to pull away and we become less engaged in the land itself and more removed, and nature just becomes something that's on a screen, like what you see here, the tapestry behind me, we forget that there's a direct consequence of us taking more than what we need and living at a standard that's more than what we need when other people are not. And so this is about creating a new portal. And what's coming up right now is the word wants to be written. So there's definitely a lot of activation here in the throat. And you see, you know, there's all of this speaking out, you know, in Congress and in legislative bodies, protesting, writing, you know, signs and picketing. You know, there is so much going on now where we are making our voices known. We are making the new world that we want to create, right? This is the new vision here. All this butterfly, all this transformation. This is an envisioning process. You see, like she's crying because she sees what the way it is, but she also has this beautiful vision of what's coming next. And we're setting the foundations now, right? And so this is about speaking out about that. It's about speaking out on behalf of those who have been oppressed, of those who, of the earth or animals that have been unjustly treated. And this is about healing the masculine and the feminine, right? It's all interrelated, right? Like, so I started with this idea about the masculine and the feminine and being connected into our emotions. And this is about, it's all about empathy, and it's all about caring. It's all about seeing something beyond ourselves. It's about the balance between the individual and the collective. Yes, I want to have an individual life. I want to live in a way that is self-expressive. And I also have a responsibility to the larger community of which I'm a part and to the entire world. My choices as an individual matter. And so it's great that I have choices. It's great that I have freedom of speech. It's great that I have all these things. And in some countries, they do not have these things. So it is really great. And I'm extremely grateful for that. However, I also, every single decision I make impacts others, right? And the more that we start to really realize this, the more that we understand our place and the value that we can add. So let's clarify anything else that we need to know from the Dreams of Gaia, my favorite decks. And just ask the Holy Ones to bring it through any messages that we need about this healing energy. We know we need to restore and replenish. We're completing a cycle. We're turning the blade down into the earth, so we're not trying to hurt each other. We're healing our ancestral patterns. We're speaking up and using our voices. All right, and so we have a few really good pieces here. Right. So this card came out, and this is the 11 of Cups, which is basically the connection between mind and body, right? So the connection between mind and body would be like the masculine and the feminine. You know, the body would be the feminine, the physical, sensual way that we interact and intersect with the world. And the mental center would be more the masculine. And this is about the fact that it's out of balance, right? When it's in balance, you know, everything is flowing, everything is connected, right? But right now it's out of balance. It's out of balance. So this is what we're working towards. And right now, there's a lot of fire energy. This is the hero card. And the hero can either kind of devolve into the rescuer on the drama triangle, or the hero can be a person that's willing to speak up, right? Like, so we saw this card together. These would be really great. So the word wants to be written, the voice wants to be heard. And this is a person who's like, it is partly my responsibility to go out into the world and to make a difference and to make a change and to whatever scale that is. Doesn't matter if you're doing it for one other person or if you're doing it for tens of thousands or even millions of people. We are here to make a difference. That is part of our soul mission. That's part of our reason for being. And right now what we're doing is planting seeds, right? So you see this wonderful elf in the forest, and he's just planting seeds with the squirrel here who's like, yeah, I'm going to come and probably dig those up a little bit later and eat them, but thank you. But that's fine, you know, because he will also leave a few, and those will then transform into these beautiful flowers that you see around him, right? So he's hopeful, he's optimistic, and we need to be in this energy. And this is really about the mental energy, right? So when we began this whole reading, we were talking about how the masculine, and this is the nine of air, so we're coming to the end of a cycle, and really what it is, you know, the hands have been tied by all of this sort of place in the mental, logical, and there's no place for the emotional. Here you see a lot of activation, the wide open lotus at the throat. You see a lot of activation at the third eye. So the intuition, the feminine intuition is coming in, the healing hands. And it's time for us to pull the sword off and say, there is a place for that intellect. It is such a strong need in our world for us to solve problems and to innovate and create and do. But we also need to bring in this healing, this voice, this knowing. We need to balance these things, right? Look at all of the light codes and the light language that's coming in on this card. It's just absolutely amazing. And so what I'll leave you with is that we are coming into a new chapter of all of this. And all of what we've been through, the anger, frustration, the infighting, the accusations, it's time now. Like, you're feeling it, right? You're feeling it. As we come closer to the lunar eclipse, which will happen on July 5th here in the United States and around the 5th, 6th in other places, it's time now to embrace the empathy, the intuitive side, the nurturing side. And especially, it is time for men to do this, to become vulnerable. I see more and more men, you know, creating men's circles and helping men get really in touch with this. They're in touch, you know, with that fiery part of themselves that sometimes can move into anger. They're getting in touch with that really grounded part of themselves, where they're a nurturer, you know, they're a nurturer. They're getting in touch with like how their mental thought processes are impacting things, and how to be in the body, right? And how to be in the body. And it's time. It's time for us to do this work. It's time for women to do this work, men to do this work, non-binary people to do this work, Black, white, Asian, Hispanic, Latinx, anyone to do this work. You're being called. Our world is shifting into a new era of consciousness. And this is calling for us to be very mindful of how we're showing up in the world. And also compassionate for those who are making this change, and it's harder for them. It's a more difficult change. It's asking more. It's asking them to do things they've never done before. It's asking me to do things I've never done before, like this, you know? So we just need to be kind as we can to each other. We need to be kind. We need to rest and replenish. This is like the best card. right? For right now. Anytime that you start to get overwhelmed, it's good to go back into this cycle and just be kind with yourself. We're entering a time where everything doesn't have to run so fast. Everything can slow down and it will all still get accomplished, right? This is the beautiful paradox, is that it will all get accomplished. But when we're more mindful, we take a little bit more time to think things through. We take time to get into our belly and into our body, and we feel the feelings, and we cry if we need to, and we lay down and sleep if we need to, and we take care of ourselves. That instinctual part of ourselves that wants to just flare up, right, and be triggered. And we take care of that self. Then we have a clarity in this vessel to tap into that intuition and that intellect and allow them to dance together. So thank you for joining me. I also invite you, if it's of interest, that you could decide to join my private community, 1millionempaths.com. And we just are creating such a sacred space for this kind of inner work, for this kind of progression of your your personal growth. We'd love to have you join us. Come on in and see. And we have a pay from the heart option so that pretty much anyone from any country can participate, can be on our live Zoom gatherings, can see our daily content. We have exercises and questions and prompts and resources and courses, all kinds of really amazing things for those who are more energetically sensitive. So I'd love to see you inside. And thank you. I will see you again soon. Namaste, my friend.